Styli Charalambous is surprisingly a chartered accountant, self-proclaimed stubborn man, and the co-founder and CEO of one of the most important businesses in South Africa right now. Being stubborn has certainly served Styli well over the 13 years that he has spent building his media empire. His business, the Daily Maverick, is a shining light in the political, economic, and media darkness of South Africa. The first 8 years of this venture-backed startup were incredibly difficult, and listening to Styli tell his story, you can feel his pain. But something changed, and an expensive $6,400 decision proved to be a pivotal moment for the future of his life and his business. I'm Charalambous. I won't keep you waiting any longer, but remember, it's not over until it's over. Welcome to the first episode of It's Not Over. With me is Styli Charalambous. Yes, that is exceptionally close to Charalambous. And yes, I understand we both have incredible beards. So if you're listening to this and not watching it, go over to my YouTube channel and get an idea of that. Styli, welcome and thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here, Nick. Thanks for the opportunity to chat about these difficult, gut-wrenching moments, and then hopefully we have a good story to tell on the other side of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I believe you do. And full disclosure, we're going to be talking about the Daily Maverick. And I am a Daily Maverick insider, and I have been for a while. I also create a column that runs as a newsletter with the Daily Maverick. So I'm a fan of everything you do. The kind of company, business, and media that you produce speaks to my journalistic heart and background. So I'm excited to talk to you about this because I know that you've had a hell of a trip over the last 8-ish years building this business. So why don't we start with you laying the groundwork? What is the Daily Maverick? Why is it important in South Africa? And why did you start it?
Yeah, so I got involved, I think after I lost a bet with a friend. I was introduced to the original founder, Branko Brikic, crazy, eccentric, genius publisher, editor, who moved out to South Africa from Yugoslavia. This was the only place that would give him a visa, came out in the 90s, and he continued his publishing career that he started out back in his homeland. And that journey into magazines and magazine publishing eventually got him to start Maverick magazine, which was the precursor, the cult originator of the Maverick brand. And when that stopped publishing, he knew that he wanted to go into the digital space. That's where digital publishing was going to go. This was circa 2008, Goldman Sachs, end of the world, financial crisis happening. And in 2009, he was getting ready to launch Daily Maverick, the digital reincarnation of this feature-driven journalistic effort. And I was introduced to him by an investor, one of the seed funder for Daily Maverick, was a close friend of mine from university days. We'd worked on other projects together. And I said to him, hey, what else you got going on? This thing we're working on is stalled. And he said, well, give me these journos and editors some money to get this thing going. Do you want to chat to them? Because they need someone with a bit of business experience to kind of help them raise some more funding and get things going. I knew very little about what good journalism constituted, what media business involved. And it just sounded less terrible than my other options. So I said, let's have a go. Let's see where this goes.
The birth of every startup, right? It's less terrible or shit than the thing I'm currently doing.
Exactly. And, but I was taken by the passion and, that Branko had. He's Serbian, I'm Cypriot origin. We're both expats in this country. And similar work ethic, and just also a stick it to the man kind of view of the world, which I quite appreciated. And this blank slate of like, well, we're going to build this thing, and we're going to change everything about news publishing and what it means to be news publisher. And I was like, just nodding my head, trying not to sound stupid. And that was the beginning of it. And this was 2009, before sort of Facebook became a big competitor to the news publishing industry, when there was excitement about the potential of traditional ad spend in print and radio and TV going to digital. And we thought, we were right in that it was going to shift to digital, but we were wrong that it was going to come to news publishers. And so that was the fire in which we were born in. And at the same time, there were some other fires brewing or mountains that we were going to have to climb, that were sort of jockeying for position of the biggest threat, beyond just the existing competitor set. But at the time, people who are unfamiliar with the politics of South Africa may not know that someone by the name of President Jacob Zuma came into power in 2009 as well, and kicked off the beginning of a decade of kleptocracy and corruption that has brought the country to its knees. And so while that was picking up steam, Google and Facebook were also making huge inroads into advertising, digital advertising, and becoming, Google was already the biggest player, but Facebook was coming on board. And so this was the fire pit that we were born into at that time, thinking we were going to build a viable business off the back of that.
Yeah, I think with my very limited journalism and media experience, it's important, the point that you're making, and it's relevant because you don't start a media company to be wealthy in 2009. It's not really why you did it, right? You did it in South Africa, and the Daily Maverick is an investigative, journalistic, objective, and independent voice, keeping the country's politicians and private sector in check. That's kind of why you started this. The rest is just peripheral clutter where you're trying to keep your head above water, right?
Yeah, and it's hard enough starting a business that needs to try and make a profit. I mean, you've been involved in many businesses and many startups. It is just incredibly hard to be one of those, and that small percentage of businesses that make it to year 3, let alone year 10. And then to do it with the additional weight of having to serve society's needs before your own, right? Before profit, we can't even think of turning a profit, but before you take into account the needs of society and what you have to deliver journalistically to achieve that. Yeah,
brutal. So tell me how you as a business earned money in the beginning. Tell me how it went in the beginning. Like you said, you had a seed investor, you mentioned introduced you to Bronco. So was it plain sailing and then there was an inflection point where you were like, holy shit, this is going bad? I think off the air before we started recording, you were talking about the slow boiling of things being difficult and troubled.
So the answer to the question is, how did we make money? Was with difficulty, right? It was an ad model. The business plan was based on an ad model completely, free to air. So keeping the journalism, this high quality journalism, the value proposition was making long form, feature length, quality journalism available on the internet, where in the early days, a lot of the publishers were keeping the good stuff for print, where all the revenue was still coming from and all the profits were there. And so we wanted to turn that on its head and make this thing available for free. We always knew that, and that was always going to be core to our mission, was making it available to all South Africans.
I did just want to pause here. And I think it's important to point out that in South Africa, print income was on the incline for like a period of 10 years after the rest of the world was starting to decline. We were still a very well-read print country for a long time. So that's why you speak of print like in 2009 as a viable thing to launch, like a print platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're always kind of being a little bit behind the curve. And what we also have is and media and news industries around the world all experience this, which is disruption was pretty much kept at bay for such a long time that when it eventually came through, it came through like a tsunami for the entire industry around the world in the space of a decade. But in South Africa, these oligopolies were basically controlling, the print sector, the radio sector, and the television sector, either through licenses being handed out by government or just the barriers to entry by virtue of being able to run and invest in a print press. So, that was still the case, and we had the existing players who were wishing our demise, and that were very quickly overshadowed by political players and other corrupt people and politicians who joined what is now a very long queue of people wishing our demise.
That's great. Okay, so an ad-based model that kind of sustained you for a while. You had venture capital that was plowing money into this entity too. And I mean, I'm interested in this one. Like venture capital for a newspaper, that feels kind of crazy.
Yeah, so the route is you start with friends, fools, and family.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much, we would go through that Rolodex of friends and fools and family who we could convince to buy into the mission. Obviously, very quickly, we were getting traction with readers. People were appreciating the quality of the journalism. Numbers were growing, so we were bringing readers and audiences to the table and showing this great growth, great engagement, even great performance on our ad side of things. But we just weren't able to generate enough revenue on the advertising. So it was this continuous state of fundraising / Greek bailout type operations for pretty much the first
separate founder.
Yeah. For the first sort of 8 years, it was bashing our head against a wall, and then recognizing that we needed to sort of restructure the model a little bit. We brought in a non-profit element into our structure, our corporate structure, and that allowed us to access grant funding a little bit easier, although it took us years to get our first grant. And then we sort of panel beated this sort of hybrid non-profit for-profit structure into place, and sort of just so thrived is the word that we use, because we were surviving and we were just making it to the next sort of payroll, counting down from the delivery of this payroll down, getting pregnant with the next one, and when's the next delivery date. And then, just by hook or by crook, through grant funding, through borrowing, through lending, through, credit card debt, and then eventually running out of friends, fools, and family. And then, trying to integrate ourselves into I guess maybe a wealthier group of friends, fools, and family beyond that, because the cause was starting to become apparent to the rest of the country that the work that we were doing was so important that it needed support. And we were just perennially in a state of road showing / begging.
I mean, there really is so many things that you said there that are worth unpacking. But the first is, 8 years is a damn long time to struggle at all. Why carry on? 8 years is more than most people will do basically anything. Why would you carry on through this pain?
There's a couple of traits that entrepreneurs and founders need to have. Some people romantically call it resilience. We call it it's outright stubbornness. Branko and I are two extremely stubborn mules, and we believed in it, and we not only believed in we believed in the vision, like the vision and the mission were just core to everything, and we just knew it. We might not have been able to articulate why, but at the time, the news industry, the journalism sector in South Africa was on a rapid decline. We've lost half the permanently employed workforce in journalism in this country in the last decade.
Wow, and that is staggering. Is that's true?
Yeah. Either through people leaving to go into corporate communications for more money and less risk, or just outright job cuts.
I'm trained as a journalist, and I left to make more money.
Yeah,
so, there you go.
And less risk, physical. Yeah. Emotional, and just the risk levels just through the roof. And so we've seen this, and a massive juniorization of newsrooms happened at the same time. So all of this was combining along with the political decline of the country, and what was happening that kind of meant every day the work that we were doing was just so important and needed us to keep going.
And I'm glad you mentioned it. It's what I thought you were going to say, is that you and Branko stuck with it for 8 years because you believed in the mission and the vision. So I'm interested in the practical, actual mission and vision. Has that changed over the last 13 years at all?
It hasn't changed, but in the last couple of years, we've done a lot of work to better define it so that we're now sharing it with the entire organization as we've grown, and as we've got people working remotely and new divisions springing up, and we're not able to kind of be in the same room with all our people all the time, and where that comes across in just by the things you do and the things you say. And so we've had to do a lot of work around actually defining it. And so we define our vision as we want to create the journalism that helps people know more and know better. And the soundbite is know more, know better. And every piece of journalism we create needs to be able to live up to that. Do people, having spent time with this journalism, do they know more and do they know better? And doesn't talk about giving them a particular point of view, doesn't talk about pushing them one way or the other. It might be an opposing point of view that can still help people know more and know better because they know what, I guess, the other side is thinking. And then the mission is, how do we achieve that? And in the last couple of years, as we've seen the strategies and the tactics of politicians and influencers trying to influence political outcomes, and fake news and mis and disinformation, it became clear that the way that we were going to best achieve this vision was by, we adopted defend truth as the mission of the organization. And that's how we were going to help people know more and know better and get to that place of achieving that in the journalism that we create.
I think jumping back to your statement of 8 years of struggle, and then there seems to be some kind of inflection point. What I want to talk about is that 8 years of struggle. How does that influence and affect your day-to-day life, like your partner, your kids, your relationships, your team's salaries? Like, what was the visceral feeling of struggling through a startup while defending the truth?
It is without doubt the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. There were periods where we didn't pay ourselves for 6 months, and not that we were paying ourselves a lot anyway. There were times where I had to keep that information from my wife. There were times, and the worst part, like there was this one time where I had to decide between paying my staff or paying my kids' school fees, and I knew that I still had a little bit of grace left with the school, so I went with the staff. And but that's those were the kinds of decisions that you have to make. It's like people's livelihood versus your kids' education. Like there was those kinds of decisions, and it just there was a lot of resentment. Why does something that is supposed to be doing such good, why is it so hard for it to work? So there was a lot of resentment to the world. There was a lot of resentment just to the industry, to corporate South Africa a lot, who wouldn't support us and who had the ability. And there was a lot of like, love what you do, but can't touch you with a barge pole because you're politically toxic for us. Yeah. And so there was a lot of resentment around that. And I think we started believing our tale of woe, which made it worse, which made staying mentally fit and spiritually fit and able even harder. And you go to some dark places, but I think what saved us was the fact that there were two of us. And when one of us was really struggling, the other was there to just, okay, look, we just got one foot in front of the next. Like, let's try this, let's try that person, we were building up goodwill all over the place. And I think we were lucky that we were also sort of multi-talented, that we could pick up a lot of the, a lot of the challenges or a lot of work that needed to be done, and run this thing leaner than anyone could imagine, and people always like, how are you not this much bigger organization? We didn't have offices before. Not having offices was cool, because we couldn't afford it, basically. I spent the better part of 10 years trying to get people into an office, like remote working, the flip was not an issue for us. But it was really difficult. And I think that the tough part was, I especially had internalized this thing of like, it is so hard, or is it ever going to come right? And that there was a lot of doom and gloom over the news industry, even around the world. The New York Times was in 2014, they wrote the innovation report, which was this raw, honest assessment of what they needed to do if they were to survive. And this was the New York Times, so imagine if they were thinking like, how hard is this, and lucky they've turned around and they've become the poster boy of the news industry since then, because they implemented most of that report. But at that time, their homepage numbers, their overall traffic numbers were dropping, like in digital, like, you know, in 2013. It's unbelievable. So that was, yeah, it was tough. And you know, and there was one time I actually said the words, I don't want to do this anymore. And all the other times was kind of like, was, you know, maybe in the back of your mind, and like, when is that breaking point going to come? You know, when is this risk and the stress worth it? You know, when is it going to be worth it? Like, how much more can we take? And there was, you know, one time we had run out, and I, you know, being in charge of the business side of things, the fundraising, the business plans, the term sheets, all that stuff was my sort of domain to take care of. And there was time when we had another bailout coming, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't have anything left in me. I can't go ahead, and I can't ask for another bailout again. I don't know if I believe anymore. And to Branko's credit, he said, okay, let me do this one, you know, and he did, and we got it.
Okay, don't leave me. I'll do this one. Please don't leave me.
Yeah. and I could see it. And I think that was probably the only time I think I've ever seen him like really worried, was when I think he realized that this could be it, because we'd formed this really sort of solid partnership. And I remember him getting the money to get us over another payroll, and I was like, fuck. Like, it would have been easier if he didn't get it, and we could just put a line under this so that my life could move on. I could go and do something else, and I could go and tell my wife it's finally over and we can start again, you know. But it was like, oh fuck, another one, right? Like, we get to live another fucking day. Okay. But I look back at that now, and I realize there's no other way to describe it other than the universe wanted us to continue.
Okay.
Okay. And there are other examples around dotted along the way where I cannot explain anything other than the universe conspired to keep us going. And
I mean, I know that feeling, but the thing that I want to see is if we can get to is like, what are the things that lead you to those moments of this universe conspiring to keep you alive? Because I don't believe generally in things like luck or coincidence. I believe that you and Branko potentially worked hard enough for long enough that opportunity, you know, kind of like found you or something. Is there anything you can learn about staying power when those universal moments just clicked into place? Like, is it tangible? Is there something, you know, that you could take away from that? Or do you genuinely just believe that you have no clue how you survived through those periods?
You know, Nick, there's a couple of distinct phases of the Daily Maverick journey. And you can actually, if you plotted it out on a graph, you would be able to see those distinct phases kicking in. And there are distinct phases in my personal development. My state of mind, my place in the world, my own self-awareness and personal development journey. And they mirror exactly those changes in the Daily Maverick journey. And there was a long period of, there was a lot of work that I had to do on myself, and a lot of childhood stuff that I was carrying into adulthood, and drove a lot of resentment and a lot of victimhood thinking. And once I'd done the work to kind of free myself of that, and to help me change the stories I was telling myself and my outlook on the world, that's when a lot of those universal bailouts started happening. And wow. And there were quite powerful moments for me to see, because I don't think you know, no one else was aware of them. You know, no one else could see the serendipity of those moments. And that for me was the lesson, was like, okay, I had to free myself of this baggage, and in some way I had to sort of wipe the crap from my own life so that I could then take that into my work life. And then just things started happening because we started telling ourselves different stories, putting ourselves in positions of opportunity rather than just believing that there was no way out of this. And that kind of kicked us off. And then there were like some just complete random things that happened where, we needed a bailout, and there was a specific random donation, rather large, that dropped in out of nowhere. Like, when I say to the amount of the bailout that was required,
Nice.
like it was, there were things like that happened.
Yeah.
That just so those were the kind of moments learning from that was kind of just how the personal life and the outlook and the mentality and the just what's going on with the founders is just so critical to how that plays out to the rest of the organization, and that for me was quite eye-opening.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for highlighting this. It's such an overlooked part of being a business owner and an entrepreneur and a founder, that the personal development part, I believe, is often more important than the business development part. Like you say, when you are in this dark hole mentally and emotionally, how do you possibly raise yourself up to make a sale, to be enthusiastic and to do this thing? It's the difficult part, is that there's no badge for personal development. We just work and we just do. Like, there's a badge for hitting revenue targets. There's a badge for growing your business, for having bigger headcount and for getting bigger and bigger all the time. But there is no badge for being a better version of yourself. But that's the work that actually makes the business side easier. And I mean, I'm so glad you brought this up, especially in the opening episode of the show, because it is just so imperative. And founders forget that you need to be okay before your business can be okay.
And the impact that founders have on the organization in terms of the culture, in terms of how it conducts itself, in terms of how it treats people, it's outsized in terms of, and accentuated. And so if we're not conducting ourselves or thinking in the right way or doing or carrying ourselves in the right way, that's going to end up being part of the organization. And that's it is often overlooked, and it's not, I don't know if there's too many business schools that they incorporate that in terms of like what the founders or CEOs could and should be doing in terms of how their own personal wellness extends into the wellness of the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I learned pretty early on in my career that your team that you've hired, if you've hired good people around you, have much more EQ than you give them credit for. I, much like you, had in one of my startups, I hadn't paid myself a salary for 6 months. It was brutal. We had 3 months of runway. I was stressed and panicked, and I thought that nobody knew, quote unquote, except when I did eventually tell my team that, listen, we've got 3 months of runway. It's going to be really tough. We might have to cut some people. They were like, yeah, we could tell. And I was like, my God, yeah, what an absolute waste of stress. Just be upfront with your smart people.
Well, I mean, that, our recruitment policy at one stage was bringing people on board and saying, well, look, listen, you're going to have to take a pay cut to work longer hours, to take on more stress and more risk. And there's a pretty good chance we might not be around in 3 months, but we can guarantee the most rewarding time that you'll ever have. And, we're building this thing, come along. And if you tell people that and they still want to come on board, then I think you get a certain kind of person. Yeah. And there were also a lot of people who were like just done with working in toxic work environments and newsrooms. And you can imagine half the industry was just cut. And so people that come from really traumatic experiences, and we were like, listen, we don't know where this thing's going or how it's going to survive, but we can just we're all in. And that's all we can promise. And people came along with that.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but a very commonly understood way to engage with journalists in this kind of era that we're in is often people, I'll say to them, they'll say to me, how do you get covered in media organizations? And I'm like, well, you just contact them. because you've got half the amount of journalists trying to produce double the amount of work, and they always need content ideas, and it's indicative of the industry we're in. But for me, that's a nice segue into how did you solve this problem? Like, you can't just have a money pit, right? You can't just have people throw money in and burn it and then you guys save the world forever. That's like, how did you actually fix this problem? Because I know you spent a lot of time doing research. I mean, you and I met up maybe 5 years ago, give or take, and you just come back from visiting the New York Times and a bunch of others, and a variety of newspapers to figure out how the hell they were all going to survive. So tell me what happened from there.
Yeah, it was part of that mindset change where, and it was that trip. It was exactly that trip where I still remember it was $6,400 to participate in the tour. So there's this institute for journalism, a nonprofit in the US called the Poynter Institute, and they organize these tours to these huge media organizations on the eastern seaboard of America, and you could pay to participate in the tour and go out and meet some really interesting people and get an insight and an inside look into what they're busy with. Get to ask their leaders questions, which was just an incredible opportunity. But living from month to month for the better part of 8 years, spending that kind of money on this trip was kind of like,
Hail Mary.
do we really want to do this? And it was kind of like, Branko was like, listen, fuck, we worked like so hard. If nothing else, you deserve it, but go and find some inspiration, and so I went expecting to see our perception of the doom and gloom in the industry. And I think this was in 2017, and went there, and I noticed that all the organizations we went to that were particularly upbeat about the future had made huge inroads into reader revenue, right? And had put up their paywalls, where 1 million or a couple million subscribers, and they were extremely upbeat, and they were launching new products. And we spoke to the team that had just launched the Daily, and and I could see the organizations that had cracked this reader revenue, that had started, were the ones who were most optimistic. And so I came back from that, and obviously there were a lot of things going around, and I was like, wow, just people, they're all positive there. We were just thinking negative, the end is nigh kind of thing down here. And I came back to Branko and I said, listen, I've got a plan. You're like we've got to crack this reader revenue thing. And he was like, strong Serbian accent, like, oh, we'll never put up a paywall. And I said, we're not going to, because I knew he was going to say that.
Yeah.
Because our mission, and we'd realized that, if we wanted to help change South Africa and for the better, we couldn't just serve the elite and put up a paywall and have 10,000 people to support us, and we'd be profitable, and we'd have a small profitable organization, but the country was going to just burn. And those were our options. Like, it was put up a paywall and be profitable, or the country's fucked. Like, there was that's what we believed the options were, and why we couldn't go that road. And so around about that time, the first paper on membership in news had been published by two women that I had the pleasure of meeting later on in my life, Emily Goligoski and Elizabeth Hansen, who wrote the paper on audience engagement and reader revenue that formed the basis of membership in news. It was the first sort of paper on that, and I was just like highlighting and highlighting and highlighting. And I knew that this model of reader revenue, where we could just ask people to join the cause and become part of this and help keep us free for others who can't afford to pay, was the way that resonated with our vision and our mission, and the needs of the country and where we were in our particular set of circumstances. For people who aren't aware of it, South Africa has 40% unemployment, 70% youth unemployment. So, how can you, in a country with those kinds of challenges, put up a paywall that's going to cut out that many people from your journalism. And so I said, I knew you were going to say that. I've got a plan, and I've been studying this, and I think we can implement this. And we were changing CMSs, or planning to change CMSs. So we had a couple of months where we could do the designing, the testing, the hypothesis testing, and put out some MVPs that were eventually going to lead to this pay what you want model of membership, where we would create benefits for people to come and be part of this community and help keep Daily Maverick journalism free for the entire country.
Just some lingo there. CMS, or content management system, is such an imperative thing for an online news publication, and shifting or changing them is like quite a monumental thing. So it was relatively good timing that you had to do this, and you had a plan, and it was like pause and possibly difficult, but really relevant work to do at that time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to be changing CMSs and too often. Like if I can avoid doing that again, I will gladly never change. There's always troubles. Like you don't want to change hosting companies too often. You don't want to change your ad server too often, and you don't want to change your CMS even less often than those. So yeah, we had some forced downtime while that was happening, and that gave us the opportunity to put together the only business plan in my life that has actually achieved the numbers that ever worked. Is like, and in fact, is actually better than the numbers that I put down. But it's the only time I've ever done a business plan that's actually achieved what we put down in the forecasts.
Okay, so from a high level, I understand what's coming, but I want to just touch on the details of this for a second, because as someone who's written and thrown out many business plans, and I don't really believe in them anymore. So you went to your co-founder and you said, I've got this plan. We're going to put in your version of a paywall. We're going to test it out. Who else did you have to talk to get buy-in from, if anybody, like your team, your investors, your VCs? Was there a process of getting like the all okay, let's move and let's do this? Like, how do you move a ship that's already sailing?
Well, for the better part of those 8 years, until we figured out what sustainability looked like, it was very difficult for us to invest in resources that weren't editorial. We just kind of realized that, look, till we figure this out, the best thing we can do is invest in the brand. And investing in the brand means investing in the newsroom when everyone else is cutting. And that allowed us to compete with organizations. And also because we're digital, we didn't have like layers and layers of overheads, management and offices and all sorts of other legacy costs. Our output per person, and the fact that our team works harder than already a hardworking bunch of people, we were creating for a long time already. We were putting out more original feature-length content than any publisher in the country, but we just couldn't justify investing a lot in product and technology. We outsourced. I mean, the dirty secret of Daily Maverick as a digital organization is that the first time we had a full-time development resource available to us was probably 9 years after we started.
Wow. That is crazy.
So that is crazy, yeah. And so we had we worked with an outsourced operation, but even then it was like we couldn't afford a full-time the dev resource, and so we managed to do a lot with. So when it came to convincing people, generally when Branko and I are thumbs up, then it was basically like, okay, fine, go make it happen, and okay. So. That's when we hired our first product person to come on board, and then it was a case of, okay, help me design this thing. And so the two of us worked on this. We designed it. We went and visited Schibsted in Scandinavia. We went to the Guardian. We got half an hour with their membership team, and we were able to get some calls with some other operators around the world, and take sort of this little tactic and strategy from paywalls, and this one from the full donation model, and this one from paywall model, and kind of like build our own membership plan. And
just give me a time frame from you visiting the point thing, the $6,400 decision that you made to getting all of this V1 up and running and tested?
I think it was in it could have been around October 2017 was when I went on the trip to New York. May we were planning on putting out the CMS. I think we moved on to WordPress in May, and then we ran a voluntary donation MVP, and then August 2018 we launched the membership program. So within a year of basically coming back with that inspiration, and then giving ourselves the sort of the target that we were going to, within 3 years, try and get a third of our revenue from philanthropy, a third of our revenue from commercial activities, and a third of our revenue from readers. We then had this strategy of like, okay, that's what we need to get within 3 years' time.
So what do you attribute to that incredibly short product development cycle? I mean, from, hey, we were an ad-based business to, and 12 months later, we've launched all this shit and like, it's amazing. How did you, like, you didn't even have a developer. How on earth did you manage that? Like, what does that even look like? Like,
desperation.
What does that look like? Desperation.
Desperation will get you over the line. And it was kind of like, it was finally, here's a model that works, that resonates with, that not only resonates with our vision and our mission, but recognizes that in a media organization, the newsroom is not a cost center. They are actually the revenue drivers for you. And this model—
What a great perspective shift, hey?
And in the past, the newsroom has been this cost center that people just cut, as opposed to like, the better your newsroom and the more experienced and the better the output of your journalism, the more likely you are to get people to come with you on this cause and this journey, because and shifting that sort of, moving from a B2B operation to a B2C, model with this. It just clicked, and it was kind of like, and that's why I said when I was reading the paper and just highlighting all these passages, it was like, yes, yes, yes. And then it was just, it was like, it was 8 years of waiting for this to kind of, these pieces to become available to us.
Yeah, this is such a good example of one of my favorite essays from one of my favorite investors, Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator. And he wrote an essay many, many years ago called How Not to Die. And he basically talks about those who survive win. Like, that's it. That's the equation of startups, is if you survive long enough, eventually you'll find your audience, you'll find your product market fit, you'll find your revenue model, and you will survive and win. And what you and Branko have done is such a good example of how not to die. So I imagine it was all like, click, we've launched this, amazing, we're now rich and wealthy and everything could just carry on forever, right? How did that launch actually go in 2018? And what happened afterwards?
So we did this big event once a year that's called The Gathering, and over the course of 10 years, it kind of like, there've been different themes, different focuses, and it's grown from like 150 people event where we had no production, and I was, putting tape on the microphone on the stage. And I remember the first one we did, the aircon at the theater that we had hired, or was given to us, didn't work, but the content was so great that people stayed the entire day. And that morphed and evolved into this event where we would get 1,000 people at the Cape Town Convention Center. And that year, after the Gupta leaks, which was this massive investigation that we're involved in that helped change the political landscape of this country, it was around the media. We called it the media gathering. We interviewed investigative journalists, we had whistleblowers, it was just themed around the importance of the media and what we needed to do. And just before the lunchtime break, and that morning we'd finished the site at 7:30. We finished the landing page for the membership program to go live. And just before lunch, I stood up in front of 1,000 people, by myself with the spotlight on me. I have an intense fear of public speaking. I have to do a lot of work just to be able to get up on stage, and that's generally with other panelists, or where I'm not standing there by myself. And I had to I gave what our now manager of membership calls my Obama moment, where I stood up in front of people and 1,000 people and said, like, we can't do this anymore. We need you to come and join us. We're committed to keep doing what we're doing, but we can't do this by ourselves anymore. And and you can choose. You can choose how much you want to contribute. But if and then we had that message, and then also, but if you sign up today, we've got Daily Maverick hoodies and tote bags and stuff, and it was just before the lunch break, so people were heading out, and we had the sign up store just on the other side, and 20% of the people in the audience signed up on that day. So 200 people signed up, and we were off to the races. And
I'm proud to say at that point that I got up from my chair, walked, and still have my Daily Maverick hoodie, and I'm still a subscriber. So your speech clearly worked.
Yeah, and but we had like a tech issue after that, and there was 2 weeks where we couldn't take any new signups. But
I also remember writing my subscription down. Like, here's my email address. You can bill me. Don't worry. I physically written like old school stuff.
Yeah, it's and there's this thing where just like you're getting product market fit despite your product or like some of your tech. That's when you got something. But we were then and then it was a case of just we've already got an audience. We know where our most loyal and engaged readers are. They come to us from our newsletters, which we'd invested in over the better part of a decade. Our homepage, desktop users. And so it was kind of like, okay, where are these people coming from? How many people are converting? What testing messages, A/B testing messages, reading the research, looking at best practices, and just this continuous, always on process of learning about, what kind of language, but making sure that it at all times never drifted from the values, the vision, the mission. So it's cancel anytime you want. It's choose the amount of your contribution. It's here are these other benefits, and we just kept adding new benefits that were linked to the Daily Maverick experience, and then communicating back to people and saying, look, yes, we've gotten traction with this. This is like changed our lives, recurring revenue for the first time ever. And we then took that, and then we could make a call. It's like, okay, well, are we going to be profitable now? And we're like, well, why would you want to be profitable? We're like, that's for losers, You don't want a financial heart attack at the end of each month. Why? Like, how would you live without that, right? But no, it was, the mission was far from achieved or over, and so any opportunity to grow that we had from this was reinvested into the newsroom, because the needs of the country and the needs of society needed us to be bigger and stronger, and also for our own protection, we needed to be bigger and stronger, because the political risks, the legal risks, and the best defense against that was to become bigger, better, and stronger. And so we've continued to invest in our newsroom and to our products and our membership team and our product and technology team. And I look at the New York Times, 1,700 journalists with 700 people in product and technology. So that ratio of like almost like 2 journalists to 1 product and tech person is like, okay, I think we're at like 1 in 60. So we've got a bit of work to do on that front. And so, we're starting to invest in our platform and our product and tech. And, we know that our future is reliant on commercial efforts and our membership program, growing to 5x of where it is now.
Yeah, I think an observation that I want to make that I think is important, that I've struggled with as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure many other people out there is what you did with Branko was the hard work up front to build a valuable product, but then you still had to continue doing the hard work to find a model that resonated with your mission and your vision and the practical day-to-day of your business. You didn't just go, well, yeah, paywalls are a thing. Everybody else is doing it. Here's a paywall. Screw it. That's the way, and that's the end of it. you had to actually retrofit all these different pieces from all these different places. I think you probably spent like a year thinking about how does this all fit together and work for us as a business. And there's so many times that I see entrepreneurs try to pull together a solution off the wall and go, oh, well, this worked for so-and-so, so it's definitely going to work for me, and then mimic what they did. But it doesn't work that way. Context is everything when it comes to your business and the way you want to solve problems.
And also the fact that in all these decisions, we've profit wasn't the motive in all of this. It was like, yes, it ultimately would be great to have it as a successful byproduct of what we're doing. But if we're not thinking about putting, the audience and needs of the audience first, then we're just going to, we're going to take advantage of them, or we're just doing something to make money, which is not that's not a great reason to do something.
There are also easier ways to make money than to start a media publication.
No, absolutely. And so that's key in all of our decisions. And we try, and also when we think about where we expand to, what kind of journalism we expand into, what, you mentioned some of the things that we're doing, feature film documentaries. We've done one. It got to Sundance. We're on our second and third documentary and docu-series now. But all of that aligns with the vision and the mission of the organization. We're just telling stories and creating journalism in a different way that expands on that. But also when we choose a product or revenue channel to go into, we also kind of think, well, does the world need this? Are we good at it? Do we have the skills? And do we have a how are we going to make it work? How are we going to get it funded? And so we kind of think about all those things as well, kind of like, well, before we jump into it, does Daily Maverick soap on a rope, should we do it? I'm like, well, yeah. Does it fit with our vision? No, not really.
Yeah.
Does the world need another soap on the rope manufacturer? No. So those kind of frameworks help us sort of keep us in check, and just keep us on the sort of like, keep it all kind of aligned and congruent with what we're trying to achieve.
All of these cool new things that you're expanding into, one of which I think is worth highlighting, considering you started as a magazine from Branco back in the day and shifted into digital only, and then you launched a newspaper after all of that, which is absolutely batshit crazy for an online publication to launch a newspaper in 2020. But my question is, were all of these cool, fun things, interesting things and necessary things only possible because of the new reader revenue you were getting?
Yeah, absolutely. That revenue, as it was growing, was giving us the support base from which we could get predictable revenue coming in, and became meaningful revenue quite quickly. And
how quickly? When you say quite quickly, like from launch in October, how was it meaningful thereafter? Like how quickly?
So to put this into context, by the time before we launched the membership program, and 3 years later, our revenue had almost tripled in total. And by that time, membership had become a third of our revenue. And that had grown so much and had become an element. And so, and then getting it on a recurring basis, it's like every Monday the account gets swept from our payment gateway and it comes in, and just having it, like, it's life changing. Like, I can't tell you, it is up there with my children's birth, every Monday when that
said, like only a founder could say.
And that kind of gave us, they gave us the confidence to know that we could plan better. We knew the areas we wanted to expand into. We knew the important areas of journalism, and then building this more holistic, broader relevance, high quality media organization. And that, so we had this model and this framework that we could use to kind of keep growing.
Okay, so as we close off, I'm interested in how this shift has affected your personal life and, how you run the business now. And my thoughts stems from this place where you chose to fund your business over your kids' schooling, and you were in this dark, deeply depressive space business-wise. How's all of this shifted, and how are you going to maintain that now?
Yeah, so the organization is very different now than to those dark days. And look, the financial stresses are still there because we've chosen to invest in growth, and growth is cash hungry, right? And we're still growing, we still are not profitable, but we've got more than 100 permanently employed people, starting out from 5. And that's in an industry that's lost 50% of its workforce. So to have that kind of trend, we've had to, and so we now have a big scary payroll that's bigger and scarier before. But we've been down this road many times. We have a plan, but we also know, and this is the thing that we're grappling with now, is we've been here 12 years. We've been doing this for 12 years. We're still founder led after 12 years. It's kind of, we can still keep check on the culture and that the vision and mission permeates, but we have to start thinking about how our jobs have changed, our roles have changed, and how we need to free ourselves from the weeds of the day-to-day operations, and that we have to start playing mentor, coach, directional roles. And how do we envisage this place running if we're not here? And what do we need to do in order to make sure that it will still be a vision and mission driven organization, even if we're not here? And so how do we build that, bake that into the culture now while we still have the opportunity to influence it, so that when the inevitable infiltration of corporate types or politically compromised types make it into leadership positions in the organization, that the muscle is still quite strong and knows that this is how we do it. So we're changing a lot now in terms of like how we try and think about strategy and goals and measuring success and staying true to the vision, not damaging the culture while you're doing all this, and giving people the clarity and the confidence and the congruency that their day-to-day work ties up into the vision and mission of the organization and the teams and the strategies of their team. And that they know, okay, this is why I'm doing this piece of work today, because it ties into all these things, and this is how it affects, society, and how it's going to benefit people. And so we're doing a lot of that work now, and that work is about how do we set this up so that we're not like so many other organizations that once the founders leave, you can basically just pull the ripcord out from the organization and it just collapses like a house of cards. And so we're quite wary of that. And that's what we're focusing a lot at the moment. And I think with that, we have this underlying thing. It's like, just, in all of this, try and be kind, right? Because there's a lot of shit in the world. People are suffering a lot. There's a lot of mental health issues and anxieties and fears and challenges going on. And so how can we create the kind of workplace that, people are proud and happy to rock up to and do their thing every day under a lot of stress? And so we're consumed by a lot of that at the moment.
And then I think my last question is possibly more personal than you want to go, but in terms of personal development, like where did you start? Where would you suggest or advise other founders start with their own personal development journeys? Because I'm certain that there are a lot of people out there who just aren't doing it. They're just not. And they don't even know what they don't know, and that they need to start to do the work. So where did you kick off, and where would you suggest that other people start?
So I guess in a way, I was either lucky or unlucky that the baggage and the shit from my childhood got to a point where I had to do something, combined with the stresses of the workplace and the environment that I was telling you about. All that stuff sort of came to a head, and my relationship with my wife was in a terrible place, and and she was also like, you got to sort your shit out, kind of moment. And I realized that there were a lot of changes, and then once that started, I just kind of saw, okay, there's a lot of work here that needs to happen. So I guess in a way I was kind of pushed into it.
Did you seek a professional? Like, did you actually get professional help? Okay.
Absolutely. So years of therapy, lots of reading, support group stuff, like all that stuff was important, and gave me this sort of like framework to live my life in a better way. But then I quickly started seeing how those were so interchangeable in how we wanted the workplace to function and
That's
how
amazing.
I wanted to deal with people in the workplace. And for the first time in my life, a lot of the skills and just how to be a human, a decent human. I grew up in a very traumatic household, so all those things, that were normal for a lot of other people weren't normal. I normalized a lot of bad behavior, and so those things I could take into my interactions with people that I was working with, and that helped create the kind of culture that we wanted to have here. And so and then when COVID hit, we also recognized that the impact that it was going to have very quickly, and we were already in a highly stressful industry, and we put a counselor on retainer and said, look,
Wow.
we're making the counselor available to anyone in the organization. We're picking up the tab. And, this was someone who had a wide range of experience. We had to pick the right person, experience in trauma counseling, addiction counseling, had been through a whole lot of that stuff himself. And, after a couple of sessions with a couple of different people, we got the thumbs up and said, okay, no, he's great. And then made him available. And then at every opportunity, every piece of communication that goes out from us as a leadership is to try and destigmatize mental health, to make it okay, to say this is coming. We're picking up the tab. Go ahead and make use of it. And even now, like a year later, we're pushing that, and then creating opportunities for him to come in and have sessions on boundaries, on communication, on wellness. Whenever we see something coming up from our interactions with people that we want to sort of, we then get him to kind of put something together, and that has made a huge impact. I think a third of our organization have made use of him in that time. Probably another third that should have as well. And it's made a huge difference to just helping us get through what was a crazy time, for a lot of us.
Wow, Styli, what a ride. I'm super proud to be a part of it, even a small part as a Maverick Insider. So now if there's anything in closing you'd like to say, go ahead. Otherwise, just tell people where they can find you, find the Daily Maverick. And if you'd like to direct them anywhere, go for it.
Yeah, so dailymaverick.co.za, that's where we do our thing. Where all our journalism goes out into the world. If you are able to read us for the first time, or you just want to support us for a couple of dollars or a couple of euros from wherever you are in the world, that's going to go a long way to helping us on our mission to serving South Africa and serving the South African public with our journalism, keeping it free for everyone. And it was great chatting to you, Nick. Thank you for this look back at some of the dark times, but also that there can be a light at the end of the tunnel that isn't an oncoming train.
Yeah, wow. I'm really happy to hear that for the Daily Maverick, it's not over until it's over.